Okay, so tonight we're beginning a new series on the Midot, on character and human nature. B'ezrat Hashem, this series will last through most of the year because I've compiled a list of about 36 Midot, strengths, weaknesses, the various characteristics that make up human nature. This is a very important series that I've been looking forward for many years. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of work to be done because even though we may learn a lot, it's one thing to learn and know, another thing to apply what we learn. So what I'm going to try to do is give you as much information as possible and some ideas on how to go about doing work on one's midot, on one's character, on one's nature. Tonight is going to be an introduction to understand a little bit about the importance of this series and what really Midot are about. So let's begin with a very interesting midrash. Tornosropos, who was a Roman, an atheist, asked Rabbi Akiva the following tricky question. And Rabbi Akiva understood from the question that it was a tricky question. Rabbi Akiva, he says, tell me, who, in your opinion, is greater? Whose handiwork is more perfect? Man's or God's? Now, to us, that would be an obvious answer. I mean, we would have an obvious answer to this very easy question. But Rabbi Akiva understood that this was a tricky question. No matter what he would say, he would have some rebuttal. So Rabbi Akiva tells Tornosropos, anticipating his question, man's handiwork is greater than God's. So Tornosropos says, what are you talking about? Could man replicate the heavens, the stars? So Rabbi Akiva says, no, we're not talking about that which is above man. Let's talk about this world, down here below. Man's handiwork is greater than God. After all, Rabbi Akiva says, just look, God created wheat. But what does man do with the wheat? He grinds it, he bakes it, he produces such beautiful cakes and tasty cookies. Look at the two. Which one is better? Isn't it obvious that man's finishing touch is better than the original? So, of course, Tornosropos understands Rabbi Akiva has already figured out what his question is. His question was going to be about the brit milah, about the circumcision. If God created man in such a perfect state, why does he come around and cut up or remove the foreskin? You follow me? If God is perfect and what God made is perfect, then why does he command, or why does man, or especially the Jew, come around and undo what Hashem did? What's the idea behind the circumcision? Rabbi Akiva, having anticipated that, of course, said, no, man's handiwork is greater, because by doing so, he's obviously accomplishing something. He's accomplishing something that was not there before. Something that was there before was in its raw form, and somehow through the brit milah, he has achieved to perfect it. After all, Rabbi Akiva tells Tornosropos, why does the mother have to cut away the umbilical cord according to you? Right? Good point. The umbilical cord is there from the beginning too. Let it stay. But we all know that if not the mother or the father, then the doctor, someone will have to remove the umbilical cord. There's something to be done beyond the birth. So why do you need the brit milah? He says, okay, so tell me then what's the purpose of the brit milah? He says, man is instructed through the brit milah to refine himself. Ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the mitzvot, letzaref bahem et habriot, to refine human beings, to refine their character. On a deeper level, what does the orla symbolize? What does it represent? What are we actually doing by removing the foreskin, by performing this mitzvah? We are being reminded that man, of all the creations of Hashem, is the only one that still needs perfection. He's the only one. Everything else Hashem created serves its purpose. Almost right after an animal is born, it can take care of itself. Within a few days or weeks, depending on the animal, it could feed itself, hunt for itself. What goes into a man's life is much more rigorous. Much more is involved. Much more effort is required for him to feed himself, for him to clothe himself. So much more. Because man needs to perfect himself. There's a lot of work that he needs to do. He's incomplete. He's not in a perfect state when he's born. He's dependent on others. The brit milah, however, on that particular spot is not only a reminder for him to perfect himself, for him to do something on his own, but to do so in an area which is critical. After all, that's the area of reproduction. That's the area that gives life. And that's the source. That particular area is the source of all the ta'avot, of all the desires. So, Kabbalistically, on a deeper level, it's not just circumcising the hand or the foot or just some other part of the body. It's circumcising that particular area, which is therefore a reminder to us where that perfection needs to happen. It needs to happen on a deeper level, on the level of the soul. As we will soon see, it is not just something physical that we do to ourselves. It is much more symbolic of a mission that we have throughout our life. This week, we're going to be reading Parashat Bereshit. And in Parashat Bereshit, we're introduced to creation. And what we see in the creation is that everything is perfect. Hashem says Ki Tov. As soon as He completed the creation, just about on everything, He says it's good. And why does He have to tell us that it's good? What's good? What is good for me may not be good for you. But when Hashem says something is good, it means it's perfect, it's useful, and it has a purpose. It's complete. Even ants and cockroaches, we may not know what their purpose is, but there's a need for them. If God created something, there's a need for it. It's tov. Upon completion, upon creating something, He therefore used the words kitov to remind us there's nothing extra in this world. In the human body, every organ, everything that Hashem made for us is there for a reason. Doctors, scientists may not know the reason for every organ, but it's kitov. It's good, it serves a purpose, and it's complete. Who is the only one of all creation where it doesn't say kitov? On Adam, on the human being. If you read Parashat Bereshit, after He created him on the sixth day, He didn't say those words kitov. Why? Because if man will be good or not good will depend solely on him. Solely on him. Not on anyone else. Man will be the one to make the decision through his free will whether he will make of himself good or bad. And ultimately, of course, that can come about only through some ability that Hashem has given man that the animals do not have. If he is expected to become tov, perfect, good, that contributes something to this world, he needs sechel. He needs intelligence. He needs intelligence because he needs to be able to distinguish right from wrong. He needs to be able to know what is worth his time, what's not worth his time, what is a priority. After all, life is limited to 70, 80 years. We don't have that much time to just basically make too many mistakes and start all over. We have to hopefully get it right the first time or early on. So Hashem gave us sechel through the neshama, through the soul. We were given something that the animals do not have. They have a certain degree of intelligence. Don't misunderstand me. The certain degree of intelligence they all have. But the sechel I'm talking about, which is endowed through the neshama, is the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. And obviously, there must be a right and wrong. And the knowledge of what's right and wrong can only come about through learning Torah for the Jew. There are certain things on the level of the neshama, on the subconscious, level that every human being knows. And we've discussed this in the past many times. The neshama on its own, a human being, even without Torah, can know certain things even without Torah, if he allowed himself to listen to his own conscience. Not everybody wants to do that, of course. But if one allowed himself to be sensitive and listen carefully to his conscience, he would know sometimes what is right from what is wrong. But otherwise, through the sechel, through the intelligence, through the neshama, and of course by ways of the Torah, this man will know what to do. This perfection, by the way, of the brit milah, when does it happen? On the 8th day, not earlier. Many explanations are given for that. But on a Kabbalistic level, 8 is above this world, is beyond this world. This world consists of 7. There's a lot of things 7 about this world. 6, the physical world. 7, the more spiritual part of this world, which is why Shabbat is more spiritual, no physical work. 6, we have 6 corners to this physical world. 8 is Olam Haba. 8 is above nature, above the physical world. So when man works on his character, when he works to refine himself, when he works to perfect himself, he's basically controlling the physical world. He's above the world, above the laws of nature. Number 8, therefore, reminds us that that is the greatest accomplishment the man can accomplish, is that when he's able to take full control of this world. The Torah Kedosha later on tells us that this accomplishment comes about how? Umaltem et orlat levavchem. You should circumcise your heart. The orla, the blockage, if we can call it that, of the heart. Since when does the heart have a foreskin or a blockage that the Torah calls it orla? We just said about the brit milah, fine. But what's this orlat levavchem that the Torah is telling us? The Torah is telling us later on that the circumcision needs to occur in one's heart. Even though physically we were reminded of our covenant with Hashem through the brit milah, we're reminded that there's a lot of work to be done to complete ourselves. Where does it actually need to be done? In what area does all the work need to take place to refine our character, to perfect ourselves? In the heart. So the rabbis tell us, the commentators explain, that means the midot. Now you're wondering why we're going to be speaking about midot. Gave you a little bit of an introduction leading to this, because the Torah specifies, is more specific, that the ultimate circumcision is not just something physical that's done to a baby at 8 days. It is something that we continuously do through the rest of our life, and it happens in the area of the heart. What exactly? Do we do heart surgery? No, it's not heart surgery. The orlat alev is the midot, the character. A lot depends on the kind of heart one has. If one has a good heart or not such a good heart, that will determine his conduct. That will determine his relationship with other individuals. That will determine whether he wants to perform the mitzvot or not, depending on what kind of a heart he has. Meaning, does he allow his midot, his raw nature, to control him? Or does he begin to refine them and to take control over them? That's where his mission will be. That's what's expected of him. Umaltem et orlat levavchem, therefore, circumcise that orla, that blockage in your heart, because it's that blockage that will interfere. It's that blockage that will give you a hard time. And it's that blockage that you're born with that it is up to you, and that is your job to remove it and to work on it. Now the big question is, why? Why should I have to do this? You know, it sounds very nice. It makes some sense. But what for? You know, we are, Baruch Hashem, I think most of us, observant, religious. We recognize what life is all about. But let's say somebody who's not so observant. Somebody who did not grow up with this tradition that God created the world, that He runs the show. You know, not everybody's emunah is that strong. How do we convince him? And this is a very tough area to convince people, as you will soon see, because people don't necessarily want to subscribe to something that may eventually require of them a lot of hard work. What for? What am I going to get out of this? So let's begin with the big question. Why? Why does Hashem want us to do this for? He could have created us perfect, just like everything else. Why do we have to do all this work to perfect ourselves? We need to do it. And the basic answer to this question is as follows. What is the chovat ha'adam be'olamo? What is man's obligation in this world? What was he created for? What does God want of him? We do know that everything in the world serves man, whether it's an antelope, whether it's iron ore, whether it's salt, right? Everything in this world somehow serves mankind. This world is for us. Hashem created the entire world before man came on the scene. We came on the scene on the sixth day. At the end, the whole world is ready for us. Take it, use it, la briut, as we say in Hebrew. Enjoy it. Just don't ruin it. Use it right. So rabbis tell us it's obvious that everything is there before we arrive, because everything is for man's use. But what's man for? So man needs to be reminded that chovato, his duty in this world, is to become close to Hashem, to form a relationship with God, to be close to Him, to attach himself to Him, to make God his king, and to make God king over the world. By doing so, he will be repairing the world. As the rabbis tell us, letaken olam b'malchut shakai, to repair this world, or to bring about the reign of God in this world. Because God is king all over the world. In other words, above us, above earth. We know that. But we want him to be here too. We want everybody to know that. We want to introduce God to the world. We want this world to be run according to his wishes. And this is, of course, with what goal in mind? Because all of this is temporary. If we understand that this is a temporary life and a temporary world, we don't stay around forever, then there must be something more other than that. Well, obviously, what's beyond that is the reward, that we will be rewarded for our job, for our part in this partnership, in this relationship. Hashem wants to give to us so much to enjoy in the eternal world, in a spiritual world. But in order to get there, we have to go through this prosdor, through this corridor. And if we do everything right, we can go on to the next stage. So obviously, there's more to it than just all this work being done here to be close to him. It really is for our benefit to do so, because we want to get to a beautiful place where there's so much to enjoy and to benefit from. And the only way to come there is through using our free will and not being a robot, and not just being like an animal that is made up of instincts that does things automatically, but through our own choices, through our own free will, through our own intelligence, to do something that as a result of that, not only will be perfecting this world, this temporary physical world, but actually doing something for ourselves in the process. In the process, we're doing something for our own neshama, perfecting it, refining it, plus eventually, this is our ticket to Olam Haba. So therefore, man needs to be aware that that is his duty. Ultimately, he's being put here not for the fun of it. Just, here, create man. Just like I created leopards and I created a tarantula. You ever see a tarantula? Big tarantula. Yeah. I mean, is that equal to a man? No way. Man is the crown of creation. There's a lot of things out there. They all serve a purpose. They're all good. But man is unique. And when man realizes that he's unique, he hopefully will ponder a little bit more and begin to think, what is his duty? What is he doing over here? People don't think enough. They don't ask themselves this question. But it's so obvious that man is different. Man has a job. And the way to accomplish this, the way to be able to form this relationship, the way to be able to refine oneself, this needs to be done through the performance of mitzvot. So besides that reward that is waiting for us, when one performs the mitzvot, when one does what is necessary for him to refine his character, he will be empowering the neshama over the physical body. He will be empowering, meaning he will give more strength to the neshama, to that soul that is within his body. Why is this so important? Because, as we will soon see, the greatest obstacle standing in man's way of accomplishing his mission is this continuous struggle between that soul, that intelligence that knows the truth, and the physical body that has all these other interests in mind. The physical body wants to sleep and eat and enjoy itself and have a good time. Sure, that is the nature of the physical body. Whereas the neshama, the spiritual neshama, has no cravings for this world. It comes from another world. It knows it doesn't belong here. It is in a way stuck in a cage called the physical body. It is a captain of a ship. It is told to direct this ship, but it's not necessarily comfortable here. It has other wishes. Now, people aren't aware of this, that the neshama speaks a different language than the physical body. It has other interests. They're not always aware of it. A Jew is lucky. Why? Because the Shabbat is intended to make him aware of it a little bit. Stop what you're doing once a week. Because you're getting carried away with all this work. Money, 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 money. Work, work, work. And that's distracting you from reminding yourself what your duty is, what you're here for, that life is short. All of these abstract ideas would never enter a person's mind who's working. So a Jew is lucky with the Shabbat, that beautiful gift of Shabbat where the physical body rests. Oh, all of a sudden I can remember I have a family. I have kids, a wife, sit down, enjoy, talk to them, rest a little bit, read a good book, pray, and take your time when you pray. Now you don't have to rush. You don't have an excuse. You're not going to work. It's a whole different experience. So Shabbat really is a beautiful opportunity to give more strength to the neshama. We need to recharge our spiritual batteries from time to time. So when one learns Torah, when one performs mitzvot, he actually gives more power to that neshama, and he's able in this way to strengthen his relationship with Hashem. The biggest hurdle, as we started saying before, the biggest struggle, the biggest troublemaker is going to be the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the source of all problems in the world, whether it's war between countries, whether it's revenge between two neighbors, lawsuits, people getting upset. Everything is Yetzer Hara. And what's this Yetzer Hara? The best way for me to describe to you what the Yetzer Hara is, because people think, there's this angel out there who's accompanying you wherever you go. It's hard for us to relate to something we don't see. We don't see an angel walking with us, trying to convince us what to do. But according to our tradition, within us there are opposing forces. Let's call them opposing forces that come from different camps. There's a good camp and there's the bad camp, the positive and the negative, which both, by the way, were created by Hashem. In order to allow true free will, in order to allow for us to really make choices on our own, things can't be too obvious. God cannot reveal himself, therefore. And it has to be equally easy or difficult to do either one, to do the will of Hashem or to go against it. It can't be obvious. It can't be too easy. That's the name of the game. I don't want to call it a game, but in some ways it is. Hashem is putting us down here below, says these are the rules. And it won't be easy. So this milchama with the Yetzer Hara is a conflict of interest between the guf and the neshama. As I said earlier, the neshama, the soul, has certain ideas, certain interests, certain things that she likes, and the guf, the physical body, has other ideas of what it likes. And therefore, there's a conflict between them all the time. In Sefer Bereshit, actually in the first parasha, at the very beginning of creation, Hashem already introduces to us and reminds us through a very fascinating story of Adam Chava with a serpent, with a nachash, which of course is very hard to understand. How do you have such a story where a serpent actually began to talk and convinced and misled Adam and Chava to not comply with a simple commandment? Don't eat from that tree, from the fruit of that tree. But as I've said it before, the basic idea behind that story, it's not just a story. It's an important message for all mankind. You came onto this world, here you are, and of course you're no longer a baby. You are mature, you're an adult, you're past bar mitzvah age. You remember Adam and Chava with the nachash? Well, the same thing is going to happen to you. It can happen. Whether you're single or married, there's a nachash. There are many nachashim actually in this world. Many serpents, many yetzer hara, many pituim, many temptations. And that story is to remind you that will be your biggest source of trouble, the biggest problem in complying with Hashem's wishes. Yetzer hara will tempt you. The nachash will try to tempt and mislead you. If you can remember that, don't make the same mistake Adam and Chava did. Be careful, right? It's very tempting. And there will be temptations day and night, every day of your life. All kinds of challenges, all kinds of temptations. So that story is an important story to keep in mind, because that is the struggle of mankind. If we can defeat the Yetzer, if we can not be misled by the Nachash, by the serpent, then we will succeed. Be careful. If you're careful and you're not misled, you win. You win. You win the game. People have lost. People have lost and then have won later on. That's what Teshuvah is all about. So that's the story of Adam and Chava with the Nachash. We're talking about Milchama with the Yetzer. This Milchama with the Yetzer, what does it really involve? The biggest problem with the Yetzer involves those characteristics that are ingrained in our nature from day one. What do I mean by that, ingrained in our nature? Human beings develop habits either because they see it in others, either they read something, they learned about it, they associate with certain people, so they adopt from others, from their environment, certain things. Those are not ingrained in them. They're not there from the very beginning, from birth. There are midot or tchunot hanefesh, certain characteristics that are actually embedded, like in a chip, from the very beginning. And the rabbis tell us, and there's a pasuk about that too, that you can tell from a child when he's 5, 6 years old, what kind of an adult he's going to be. There are certain things that you can already detect when he's so small. He's so young. He's a child. But you can already see certain characteristics, certain traits. You can already see a little bit. And that is, of course, the time to make sure that you tell him about it if it's something not too good. Or if it's something good, that you further encourage it. You can tell already when he's young. So those that are embedded, ingrained from the very first moment, from birth, are the most difficult ones of all. If they're negative, if they're tchunot, characteristics that are not too good, and they are there from the very beginning, that means you were born with them, those are the hardest ones to deal with. Of course, things that we form later on, habits, are difficult to get rid of too. But since they are learned or adopted, they're more difficult to cast off. Give you a quick example. Somebody was a communist ideas, atheists. He's not born with that. He learned that from school. He learned that from his friends. He can remove it. He can change his mind. He can decide to be a Republican, right? No problem. But the midot that one is born with, you were born with them. And when I gave a series about the mazalot, astrology, I explained how each mazal has certain netiyot. Netiyot meaning inclinations, and I'm very careful to emphasize all they are inclinations, because I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea that you're stuck. Because as we're going to see, that's what this series is all about. That even if you have a certain midah, and it's very difficult to work on that, it doesn't mean you're really stuck. You have the intelligence, you have the free will, and you have been given the know-how, hopefully through the Torah, to empower the neshama to do battle against these characteristics. If you don't want to empower the neshama, obviously, then it's going to be a real tough life and struggling with these midot. One has to be motivated to do it. So I explained in the beginning, one has to recognize what is chovato be'olamo. What is his duty in this world? Why are we here for? You have to begin with that. Otherwise, why should you be motivated to change? Why should you be motivated to do any work? So one has to understand the purpose of all of this. Otherwise, we can't even go on to the next step. The greatest danger for one not to do anything with himself is that he removes himself from Hashem. He becomes more and more distant. When one becomes more and more distant from God, umekalkel tatzmo, instead of refining himself, instead of completing himself, he's actually doing the opposite. He is ruining himself, making things worse. And when a person makes himself worse, he makes the world around him worse. He destroys himself, he's destroying the world around him. People have been destroying this world because they themselves have destroyed themselves. Today, families are being destroyed, are falling apart through divorce. Because the human beings themselves have self-destroyed themselves. In other words, their nature. They haven't done battle with themselves. So the family unit, as a result, also, everything is falling apart. That's why we need Mashiach more than ever. Everything is just falling. People are destroying everything. A tremendous kilkul. What could have been a paradise, what could have been a beautiful place, if man would only apply himself properly, if we were to only do the right thing, to empower the neshama over the physical body. If one does control himself, if one is able to take control over his nature, the end result of that will be that he will get closer to Hashem, he will be able to refine himself, he will be able to repair this world, or bring it to completion. People don't understand what Mashiach is for. Mashiach is to do that which man should have done. Since we haven't done it, he comes and perfects the world. He brings it to its final stage of completion. We would have wanted this to happen 3,000 years ago. We're almost, 57, 70 now. It's almost at the end. This world is not going to last more than 6,000 years, the physical world. Look how long it has taken, because Hashem has given us chance after chance to try to repair the world. The Jewish nation was given that responsibility. It hasn't happened. In order, therefore, to achieve our mission, to bring ourselves to a state of perfection and this world, we were given the neshama, and this neshama, through the Torah, has the instructions of what exactly it needs to do. What happens in the real life, however, is that not too many people go about doing any of this work on themselves. And it's a shame. Why is it a shame? Because they are aware, human beings are aware of machalot haguf. Physical ailments, people are aware of. And when a person is physically ill, he does usually do something about it, right? He goes to the doctor or to the pharmacy, I hope. So it's a shame that for the physical body, people are aware and they do something about it, but for the neshama, they don't do. And as the Rambam points out, in the same way that the guf has physical ailments, machalot, the nefesh has machalot, the neshama has machalot. They are spiritual ailments. And they are the midot. And as I started off saying in the beginning, for those of you who were not here, I've put together a list of about 36. Some good, some not so good. Whether it's stubbornness, whether it's anger, whether it's laziness, right? These are machalot nefesh. They're not physical ailments. These have to do with the nefesh, the tchunot nefesh, the character, the nature, not the physical body. And in the same way that we are cognizant and we usually do something about our physical, we should realize that there's something perhaps wrong, not right with the nefesh, and do something about it. But as the Sefer Mesilat Yesharim, I think, explains, somehow more people put more effort into all kinds of research. These days, the scientists are trying to find out if there's any water on the moon. You know how many millions of dollars are being spent on all these research? And even in Torah, let's talk about the area of the Torah. There's tremendous amount of rabbis and Talmidei Chachamim who devote a lot of time to pilpul, to halacha, to midrash, to all the areas of Torah. And there's a lot of areas of Torah learning. And they devote hours, tirelessly devoting hours and effort to understand the Gemara. And somehow, not even a small fraction of that effort is being devoted al avodat hamidot, on working on oneself. You don't have too many classes. There are some, but not too many classes that are devoted for self-improvement. Go. You hear about them? There are a few. There are some. But how many people attend them? You will see Baruch Hashem yeshivot being full with 300, 400 students. And what are they learning? Gemara, Chumash, Midrash, Halacha. Some even learning Kabbalah. Very nice. How many are learning Musar on a regular basis, and not just learning it, using it, applying it, trying to work on themselves? So not enough effort is being put on the nefesh, on working on one's midot, as much as it's being put on everything else. So let's try to figure out for the next few minutes why that doesn't happen. We started off in the very beginning to say that this is so important. This is what life is all about. That's what the circumcision represents. And let's not even get to the non-Jewish world, just the Jewish world. Why aren't there more people working regularly on their character, on their nature, on their midot? The first explanation is a simple one. Hashem spells it out very clearly to us. My child, you want to know what I want from you? Don't get too confused with the 613 commandments. That number is big. There's a lot of laws. And by the way, those laws don't always apply to you at all times. One of them is once a year. One of them is only in Eretz. Some of them are only in Eretz Israel. Right? So don't get too overwhelmed by 613. Hashem tells us through Moshe Rabbeinu, Ma Hashem shoel mi'imach. What does Hashem ask of you? Kim li'ir'aoto, to fear Him. Lalechet bidrachav, to go in His ways. Ula'ava oto, and to love Him, to do His mitzvot. That's it. Very simple. What does it mean, lalechet bidrachav? The commentaries tells us what does it mean to go in His ways. He has a way, He has a path. Lalechet bidrachav means to emulate His midot, to be like Him. Not that we can be a God, but to be like Him. Just like He is kind, we should be kind. Just like He's truthful, we should be truthful. Just like He's giving. To follow His ways means to emulate His midot, His nature. Not that He has a nature like human beings do, but that we know of Him. That's what He wants us to emulate. So on the very basic level, if you wonder why people are not working on themselves, refining their character, is because they haven't really contemplated this basic question. What does Hashem really want of them? This is what He wants of you. He doesn't want you necessarily to just memorize books, to just do things out of routine, just to do it because He asks you. He wants you to perfect yourself. He wants you to be a real decent human being. He's giving you that job. He's created you in a raw form, and He's giving you a job for you to perfect yourself, for you to circumcise yourself. And therefore, some people even haven't gotten to this point yet of asking themselves, what am I supposed to do? What should I do? Where should I spend most of my time and effort? So that's a simple explanation. People are not even holding by even asking themselves this question. And if one were to really ask himself this question, what this would imply is he has to figure out what's important in life and what's not important, what is a priority and what's not. And here he's being reminded, if he's honest, This is a priority. To work on myself, to have a good relationship with him, that's a priority. That's important. I need to spend time on that which is really important. There are other individuals who don't realize that all the good qualities that the Torah wants us to adopt are not ingrained. We're not born with them. We need to work on them. People just think, oh, it's going to come. You know how some parents react with children, when he'll grow up, he'll be fine. Like it's something automatic. You know, just like you grow, you know, a little baby eventually becomes 5'6", 5'8", 6 feet. Just give him a little bit of cereal and milk. You know, it just grows automatically. The physical body, you don't have to do too much and it will grow almost just about automatically. You have to give it some cholent also on Shabbat, you know, just a little bit spice too. But otherwise, you don't really have to do too much. And there's some basketball players who got to be 7'4". What did they get already? The same ingredients that we got. Right? The physical body just grows. But the neshama? No. It requires a tremendous amount of work. So some people think it's going to come. Hey, he's going to be nice. He's going to be kind. He's going to be charitable. He's going to be patient. He's not going to get angry. He's not going to be so stubborn. Eventually, when he grows older, he'll be just fine. He'll calm down. No way. It doesn't happen just like that. It requires a tremendous amount of work because all of these midot that I'm going to talk about soon, I'm going to mention a list of the ma'alot, high levels that one can achieve, requires work, progressively, constantly. Otherwise, it doesn't happen by itself. And since some people just take it for granted, they take it easy, they think it's going to happen. No, because these are not ingrained, we have to acquire them. We have to find the means of acquiring them. The means, of course, are in the Torah, in the books. We have to go about doing something. They don't come by themselves. So because people don't understand that, they simply don't go about finding that mechanism, searching on how to acquire these midot or these ma'alot. One has to learn. One has to learn a lot and needs to learn on a regular basis. You can't just learn once a year. You have to learn about these things on a regular basis. You have an individual who simply is unaware of his faults. He knows his duty, needs to perfect himself, refine his character, be a good man. He's already beyond the first step. He does know, but he doesn't know his faults. Lema davar domeh, what is this compared to? To Reuven, who's looking for Shimon. He steps out here on Beverly Boulevard looking for Shimon. He just doesn't know what Shimon looks like. Will he ever find him? No. If you don't know what you're looking for, how are you going to find him? So yes, I want to look for him. Yeah, but you don't know what to look for. Person has to recognize his faults. So there are some people who simply have not progressed, have not done too much work on themselves because they don't recognize their faults yet. They're not familiar with those faults. That's another individual. Then you have the individual who does know his faults, but he's lazy. Reuven knows who Shimon is, but he's not bothering to look for him. He's not in the mood or whatever. He's lazy. That's another individual. Then you have, of course, an individual who thinks he knows it all. And this, by the way, is a very typical attitude amongst people who know the truth. They're completely familiar with their faults. Oh, they say, oh, this is obvious that you have to be kind. It's obvious that it's not good to be stubborn. It's so obvious that it's a terrible sin to get angry. It's obvious. What did this attitude do? It minimized everything because everything is obvious. And as a result of minimizing it because it's so obvious and true, that they don't realize that they need to work on this. In other words, here we have people who are knowledgeable. They're in full agreement of this. They know even their faults a little bit. But because of their attitude that this is true, it's obvious. They hear a drasha, they hear a speech, they read a Sefer Musar. Yeah, it's true. Chas v'shalom, asur, to do this or to do that. Yeah, never, of course. They'll tell it to you, and they really mean it. But they're not going to do anything about it. You know, they're not going to do anything about it. They don't realize that this information is there because we have it in ourselves. In other words, we have some of these problems in ourselves. It's not just that others have it. Even though we know it's wrong, You got to identify it. You got to say, wait a minute, this sounds like me, you know. And Baruch Hashem, found a solution for those who don't want to admit their faults so easily. He gave them a woman. When you get married, your wife hopefully will point out your mistakes. She'll know you better than your own mother. She'll spend more time with you. But then, of course, it's up to the husband to listen. That's a hard thing for some men to do, to listen to what the wife says. Yeah. So there are ways that Hashem communicates to the individual where his faults is, if he's willing to listen, if he's willing to learn and take action. But that does not always happen. So this avodah ala midot, this tremendous amount of work on the midot, is a tremendous job. And as I said in the very beginning, it is no different than the physical labor that we must go through for parnassah. If you look at life, even though there are some people who won the lottery who don't have to work hard, I know. But the way things work regularly is that man has to work for a living, he has to work hard, right? 8 to 5 or whatever it is. He has to apply himself, he has to travel, he has to get in the car, whatever it is. Life is not easy. So just think about it. The Torah for the guf, the amount of effort for the physical body, for it to be happy, content, for it to have parnassah, for it to live a normal, comfortable life, it takes a lot, right? It takes a lot to be happy. And not too many people are happy these days. But it takes a lot of effort for the physical body to be happy. Rabbis remind us that just like the physical body requires effort, don't think that the neshama doesn't require effort. If anything, the neshama requires much more effort for it to be taken care of. A lot more effort, constant vigilance, because we have this enemy, number one, who's trying to ambush us, called the Yetzer Hara. And this enemy is there from day one, lapeta hatat rovetz, like the Torah says. He's at the entrance. He's there waiting for you from the very beginning. When you were born, he's there. We have it with us. We're not talking about things that we pick up later in life, even that which we're born with. It's there from the start, and that's why it's so hard. That which we have from our nature, that we have either through our, mazal, or even some inherited traits, that is the hardest one. And as I said earlier, I began to say, I call these inclinations, astrological inclinations, because you can control them. Don't for one moment believe, that's it, I'm born with this nature, I can't change it. It is true, the Gaon of Vilna does say, that if we have a certain nature, you're not going to eliminate it, you're not going to eradicate it. It's always going to be there. But you can control it. That's the important part about what we're going to be learning, is how to control these midot. But controlling is only step number one. There's a step number two. As the commentaries tell us, there's something called lichbosh tamidah, and there's something called letaken tamidah. Lichbosh means to control. You hold yourself back from getting angry, for example. But it still makes you upset. You're still upset. You're still causing yourself a fight within you. When a person reaches the point of tikkun midah, repair, does not mean that he's no longer has anger in his system. It's just that he's a lot calmer about it. Whatever brings him to anger doesn't bring him to anger. See what I mean? You could bring yourself to anger, but control yourself. You're upset, but you're not going to say anything, you're not going to do anything. That's very nice of you. That's admirable. Kol hakavod, as we say in Hebrew. But whatever got you angry, whatever triggered, that shouldn't be there either. Otherwise, you have to do battle, constant battle. You don't want to do constant battle with the Yetzer Hara. You want the Yetzer Hara to be your friend, not your foe. Could your Yetzer Hara be your friend? Yes, the Kabbalah says when he stops bothering you. When does he stop bothering you? When you defeat him day after day. He says, okay, forget him. I'm going to go to someone else. So when a person sees that he's still doing battle with the Yetzer, with the same problem, then he hasn't been metaken tamidah. All he did was maybe kavash tamidah, which is, by the way, it's good too. You can stay out of trouble by being kovesh. controlling your midah, conquering your midah, but you're still fighting. Oh, you're upset, you're bitter, right? The trick will be, Ezat Hashem, and hopefully we'll learn as much as we can about the midot, to come to the point of tikkun midot. It doesn't even bother you. But is it there? Of course it's there. One of these days, you can get upset. And by the way, sometimes you need to get upset. As long as it's on the surface, not inside. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So these Kaas, anger, is of course one of the midot that we'll talk about, how to use it. And everything that Hashem created is there for a reason. These midot, these human characteristics, are there for a purpose. We just need to know how to use it. In order to succeed in this process of lichbosh tamidot and tikkun midot, which is a process, it has to come about through Torah. Why is that so? This is something that I covered a little bit in the past too, when we spoke about derech eretz. If you remember the lecture about derech eretz kadma leTorah, to have good character, good nature, to conduct oneself properly. The reason why one needs Torah for doing battle with the midot is because Torah will bring about yirat shamayim, the fear of heaven. If one wants the midot to last, if one wants his achievement to really be a true achievement, and for him not to go back and regress, he has to combine with every midah yirat shamayim. What is this compared to? I think it's brought down in Sefer Orchot Tzadikim or in Mesilat Yesharim. A lot of what I will be saying, by the way, is taken from those books. He says, imagine a string of pearls. Is that what it's called in English? A string of pearls. How do you make sure the pearls do not fall out of the string? You tie a knot at the end, right? Imagine you undo the knot. All the pearls will fall out. It says all the pearls, all the beautiful midot that a person may acquire, if there's no yirat shamayim, the fear of heaven, that's directing him, that is accompanying him in this work, in this mission, it will be easy for him to fall, to lose. You have therefore a lot of goyim, non-Jews, who may be excellent, with a beautiful nature, good and kind-hearted, but there's no guarantee, because they don't have a Torah to anchor. It is by they're doing this because that's their nature to do so. There are people who by nature are kind. They don't have the challenge of being kind. They have some other challenge, perhaps not to be lazy, perhaps not to procrastinate. Some people procrastinate. By the way, we'll be talking about that too. So they may be kind. They don't have that problem. They have some other problem. If there's no yirat shamayim, if there's no Torah, if there's no God who's governing, who's dictating, who's helping us with this process, then it could easily fall apart someday. There's no guarantee that it will last. So therefore, one learns Torah. Torah is, as I said earlier, it empowers the neshama. It gives him direction, but it also, hopefully, will instill in him what the necessary, the most important ingredient that's necessary to control one's midot, and that is yirat shamayim, because he said so. Remember Esav? You know who Esav is? Esav. You know what good midah he had? He had one good midah. Kibud avayim. Yeah. Rabbis tell us kibud avayim, honoring one's parents, is a beautiful midah. Of course, it's a beautiful mitzvah. It's an important mitzvah. The reason why Hashem gave us that mitzvah, there's various reasons, is that through this mitzvah, we will be able to fulfill all the mitzvot. Why? How? Because what is kibud avayim? Kibud avayim is, think about it. They fed you, they raised you, they gave life to you, they took care of you, they love you. And if we realize that, we will come to realize how much Hashem loves us and how much He takes care of us, how much He gave us life, and how much He does for us. And as a result, we will come to do His will, His mitzvot. So this mitzvah of kibud avayim enables one to eventually come to fulfill the mitzvah of ahavat Hashem, the love for Hashem. So my question was, wait a minute, Esav never progressed. In his kibud avayim, there was no equal to it. Greatest rabbis, Tanaim, said, we come to his ankle. We can't even reach him. Esav Rasha, how come he didn't progress such a beautiful mitzvah? And my explanation for this is with what the Rambam says. The Rambam says that all the non-Jews in the world can have a share to the world to come on condition that they fulfill the 7 Noahide laws, but they did so not because of their good nature, they did so because God commanded so. That's a very important point. There's a lot of people out there who maybe are very good. They need to comply, they need to fulfill the 7 Noahide laws because he said so, not because they think so. Otherwise, they're just nice people. They're not necessarily Hasidei or Mot HaOlam that have a Chelek L'Olam Haba. They're righteous of the Gentiles. If they want to have a share to the world to come, they need to have complied with the 7 Noahide laws because he said so. Look at the difference here, because if he said so makes a big difference. It's a big difference if you are being motivated to do something because Hashem said so. That's a completely different ball game. It means that you will do so even when times are tough. You will do so even though when you're struggling, when you don't feel like it, because he said so. It's a big difference. If there's Yirat Shamayim, it's a big difference. Let's go back to Esav. You know why Esav did not progress? Because he did not do Kibud Avayim because Hashem said so. The only time Kibud Avayim or any mitzvah has the ability to empower the neshama, to allow the individual to progress, to become better, is only if he does it because Hashem said so. Then mitzvah goreret mitzvah. As the Rabbi tells, one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. One good midah will lead to another good midah. But if there's no yirat shamayim, if a person is not concerned with what God says, then he may be a nice person, but there's no guarantee to that nice midah that he has if it will be there during hard times. You know what they say, a good friend, how do you know who's a good friend? In time of need. That's when that's when you can really test someone if he's there, if he will be there for you. If the friendship is true and sincere. Otherwise, it's all fake. Otherwise, they're just concerned about themselves and they're just nice. Nice because it's okay and it's easy to be nice. Well, sometimes it's not easy to be nice. And if you're still nice, that means you really believe in it. So if one has Yirat Shamayim, hopefully it will give him the strength that all that hard work will be able to last. If a person learns philosophy, if a person learns other chokhmot, they will not have the same effect on him. A person can learn about psychology, human nature, go to classes of anger management. They do something. They remind him, they train him, they try to guide him, they give him some ideas. But does that change the person really? No, it doesn't change the person. The only thing that can change the person or refine his character to the point where he actually takes complete control is Torah. To learn Chokhmah Chitzonit will not accomplish what the Torah accomplishes. Let me share with you what B'ezrat Hashem the Torah will accomplish, or what will the continuous progress of working on oneself accomplish. And it is mentioned in Masechet Avodah Zarah. It is also mentioned elsewhere. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says, one who learns Torah, the Torah will bring him to the midah of zehirut, of being cautious. Zehirut will bring him to zerizut, to being diligent. Zerizut, diligence, will bring him to nekiyut, cleanliness, organization. Nekiyut will bring him the perishut. Perishut means to abstinence, to be able to control oneself, not to overeat, as an example. Perishut will bring him to tahara, to purity. Tahara will bring him to chasidut, to piety. Chasidut will bring him to anava, to humbleness. Anava will bring him to yirat chet, to true fear of God. And yirat chet, the fear of God, will bring him to lidei kedusha, to holiness. Kedusha will bring him lidei ruach hakodesh. Kedusha will eventually lead him on the way to acquire divine inspiration, ruach hakodesh. And ruach hakodesh mevi'ah lidei tchiyat hametim. And ruach hakodesh, the next step for that is being able to bring others back alive if they died, like Elyahu Navi and Elisha. What we see from this, it's progressive. You can't skip, right? It takes a lot of work. It takes time. These are not midot, by the way. These are these are ma'alot. These are levels. Obviously, in some ways there are also midot, but we won't be talking about these ma'alot so much. We'll be talking more about midot, nature, character. These are just levels that one, of course, who works on his midot can attain these high levels. What is that? I'll tell you where you can see it in which sefer. It's also in the Gemara, it's also in the Midrash, and it's also in various sifrei musar, including Mesilat Yesharim. I just want to cover another couple points before we finish. I just shared with you the progress and where it leads to. If one does not do anything, it will have the opposite effect. Rabbis tell us whoever does not work or even make an effort to work on his midot, basof mo'es batov, he will despise anything that is good. What is that compared to? A person who is sick in his stomach, who he needs to eat. He can't even take the food, healthy, good, tasty food. He won't be able. He says, no, I don't want it. In the same way, a person who doesn't ever make an effort, never makes an effort to work on any of his midot, in the end he will be mo'es. He will despise, he will ridicule and make fun and not want to have anything to do with anything that is good. It will be just the opposite. In order to, B'ezrat Hashem, help every one of us to begin this process and to continuously work on oneself, we need to remind ourselves of a very important rule. Something which, again, I spoke a lot about. Hakol bidei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. The rabbis tell us, and remember, everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. Everything that comes to us in our life, whether it's marriage, children, health, unless you damage your health, lawsuits, neighbors, homes, businesses, investment, ups and downs of this kind, we don't decide that. For the most part, it's part of our mazal. It's part of our fate and destiny. Akol bidei shamayim. Chutz mirat shamayim, the main area where we have free will, free choice, where we can really accomplish, succeed, or fail, that we will be responsible for, is, are we God-fearing or not? Do we perform mitzvot or not? Do we give charity or not? Did we get angry or not? Midot, yirat shamayim, mitzvot. That's pretty much it. That's what makes man. His true success and failure is in this one area. You come upstairs, why? They're not going to ask you, why didn't you make $10 million? Because I didn't feel like it. I didn't care for it. They're not going to mind. You think they mind? I wanted Bill Gates to take all the money. Well, what's the difference? Well, who needs it, right? We don't need it. We just need to pay the bills, right? They're not going to care. They don't care about that. Why did I make us? You could have done, if you would have worked yourself a little harder, you would have taken 2 jobs, maybe you would have made a little more money. They don't care about that. They care about, why weren't you honest in your business dealings? Why were you upset? And why did you hit? And why did you curse? And why did you make fun? Why did you speak lashon hara? Right? Why did you gossip? Why did you get up in the morning? You could have easily got up. No, I was tired. We should have gone to sleep early. These are the kinds of things they're going to ask us. That which we really had the ability to choose. That's called yirat shamayim. Rabbis tell us, therefore, you know who you should admire? Not the rich man, not the smart man. These are gifts from heaven. As Yirmiyahu says, these are not individuals to admire. Who should you admire? Ezu Gibor, who is really strong? Not the one that's going to the Olympics now to pick up 500 pounds weights. I know he exercises, I know he has muscles, and these are not big. What should you admire? Ezu Gibor hakovesh et yitzro, one who can control himself, one who conquers his yetzirah, one who goes about refining himself. That's something to admire, because that is something he did. That is not a gift from heaven. That is not something that he inherited. He did it on his own. Therefore, that's something to admire. You want to know how to go about this? There are several sifrei musar. Let me list 7 of the most famous ones that are known to be excellent sifrei musar that can help somebody work on himself. That is Orchot Tzadikim, Mesilat Yesharim. Some of these are in English translation too.
And all online.
And there are online. Sharei Teshuvah, is that online too? Chovot HaLevavot, Reshit Chochmah, Pele Yoetz, and Shevet Musar. I just gave you 7 of the most famous. There are others. There are quite a few others that are very good, more contemporary. These are the 7 classic Sifrei Musar that are known throughout the Jewish world. Each one of them, of course, is a different style, but very powerful and very, very important. Most of you heard of what Shlomo HaMelech said in his famous book Kohelet. Tov Shem, Mishemen Tov, V'yom HaMavet Miyom Yivaledo. It is better to have a good name and make yourself a good reputation than the most expensive and fragrant oil. Fragrant oil doesn't last too long. Before you know it, it's done. A good name, a good reputation will accompany you and follow us even in the afterlife. It is something that will remain. It is something that the children will be happy with, that their father, their grandfather, great-grandfather was a big tzaddik. A good name lasts forever. V'yom ha'mavet miyom yivaledo, and the day of death is much more important than the day of birth. Why is that? Because all babies are cute. But that baby can be a monster. And we won't know that until he's lived his life. And at his funeral, when a person is eulogized, that is when we know if this man was a good man or not. Was he cute or not? He may have not been so cute after all. So Yom HaMavet Miyom Yivaledo, that's the only time we can know, because life has a lot of ups and downs and challenges. And therefore, we don't know if man will succeed or fail until the time comes when we eulogize him. And hopefully we will say the truth in the eulogy about this man or woman. But that is the time that we can see whether he succeeded and failed. And success and failure, remember, is not money, because that real estate is not going with him to the grave. That money is not going with him. Only his ma'asim tovim, his midot tovot, his good character, his good nature. Whose life did he touch? Who did he impress? What did he accomplish between himself and his neighbors and his friends and his family? What kind of a man was he? Of a husband, of a father, of a brother? These are the kinds of things that matter. Of course, mitzvot are important too. But remember, doing all the mitzvot and being obnoxious is not worth it. Right? Being a kind-hearted person, being good, you still need to put on tefillin, you still have to put on mezuzah, you still have to wear tzitzit, you still have to keep Shabbat, you still have to perform the mitzvot. But remember, the greatest challenge of all and the hardest of all is not tefillin or Shabbat. Believe it or not, the hardest one of all is midot. To work on oneself, to deal with his personal custom nature that each one of us has. And to do so successfully, that means that this man has succeeded. So Bezat Hashem, in the next 36 weeks or so, approximately, we'll be covering one midah per week. And Bezat Hashem, I hope that through this learning, we will gain more control over our neshama and over our guf. Bezat Hashem.